Hey everybody, welcome to Lambert Drive Studios channel. I'm Jason, and today's video is Gibson versus Epiphone. In this video, I'll be giving you a rundown on quality and sound and a few different other things, so hopefully you can make an opinion on which one the right guitar might be for you. So let's listen to some sound examples right now and see if you can tell the difference. Okay, for the guitar comparison, I have both the Les Pauls going in through the same settings, and they're both using Neural DSP Soldano amp. Okay, that's the first one. Here's the next Les Paul. Okay, so after listening to those sound examples, are you able to tell the difference between the Epiphone and the Gibson? Which one is which? If you want to know, make sure you stick around to the end of the video and I will reveal which guitar was which in those recordings. Also, if you're into guitars and guitar related accessories, which I assume you are since you're watching this video, help me out and hit the subscribe button as I release new content weekly on guitars. Okay, let's get into some key differences between the Gibsons and the Epiphones. Obviously, the Gibsons are made in America, whereas the Epiphones are built in China starting in 2002. The Epiphone factory recruited some ex-Gibson luthiers to help get the process off the ground, and obviously having the guitars built in Asia helps keep the price down as well. There's a lot of similarities between the two factories, but one of the key differences is that the Gibson has a lot higher skilled workers there, and the American-made guitars tend to hold their value a lot better because of this. Key difference number two between the Gibsons and the Epiphones is obviously the materials. The wood used on the Gibsons is of a lot higher quality maple and has a lot fancier look to it. A lot of the tops will have like a flame visual, and it's very sought after for people who enjoy the fancy tops. And because the wood is a lot better quality in the Gibsons, it'll have more resonance as well. If you sit with a Gibson and ring out a note, it'll ring for a lot longer than an Epiphone guitar will. Arguably, the biggest factor in a guitar's sound obviously comes from the pickups, and the Gibsons have a lot more clarity and definition, especially when you ring out a big chord and you can hear a lot wider frequency range, a lot more low end, a lot more high end. Some of the Epiphone guitars, though, are fitted with Gibson pickups, and these ones are in the higher price range of the Epiphones. Okay, the last set of key differences between the Gibsons and the Epiphones starts at the headstock, and you'll notice I'll put up a picture of the Epiphone headstock and the Gibson headstock, and you'll see that the Epiphone headstock is just a little bit thinner and narrowed in, and the Gibson is a little bit wider. Although this is not a sticking point, if you've idolized Gibson players your whole life, you'll notice a little bit of a difference here. And then moving down to the body, the Gibsons are a little bit thicker than their Epiphone counterparts. Okay, now we've gone over the differences and some key facts about the Gibsons and the Epiphones. I just wanted to dive a bit more into personal opinion and which one I think is better. I've owned a Epiphone Les Paul Custom since 2007, and I've used that guitar on absolutely everything. Recordings, I've used it live, I've taken it everywhere with me, and I absolutely love it. It's only within the last couple of years that I've picked up a Gibson Les Paul Standard to use and record with, and it's a great guitar as well. The big difference for me is when picking out an Epiphone, you got to make sure that you get the right one. They're not all built the same. So now let's do the big reveal. I'm going to put up the sound again for both the Les Pauls, just so you can hear it quickly again right now. Okay, if you guessed guitar 1 as the Gibson Les Paul, you are totally correct. Good job. That was the Gibson. And the second one was obviously the Epiphone Les Paul. One, we're going to go through classic, standard, and then a custom, and what to look for, because they're not all made the same. So the first one I have in my hands right now is a classic. One of the things I like to do when picking these up is I like to check out the intonation. Obviously first I get it in tune, but then the next thing I like to do is I like to check how they're set up and their intonation on the 12th fret. Okay, I got the Epiphone Les Paul standard in my hands now, and this one feels pretty good too. The only difference is the setup from the factory is not always the greatest. The string height on this one off the fretboard is like ½ an inch, like there's quite a bit of raise on it. It needs to be set up on it and lowered a lot. You can see, look at how high those strings are off the fretboard. So the intonation probably is not the greatest on it. Weirdly enough, this one actually went in tune a lot easier than the first one did. If you really want to put the guitar through its paces way down above the 12th fret and make sure all those frets pass there really good. No dead frets. You can do all your bends. One of the major differences I find with the Epiphones is they're a lot lighter than the Gibsons too. Okay, the last one I'm looking at is the Epiphone Les Paul Custom, and this is the highest end of the Epiphones that they get without going into the custom guitars. And this is actually one that I own. I own a 2007 Epiphone Les Paul Custom, and this is a 2022 newer model. And it feels pretty much roughly the same. One major thing I do when looking at the Epiphones and trying them all out, because they're not as high of quality, I like to go up into the higher frets a lot of the times, and I'll do some major string bends, and you can really notice the difference on an Epiphone compared to a Gibson here. And when you're trying to pick out an Epiphone that you want to buy, you got to go through like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them before you'll find one that really has a lot of good string sustain. I find a lot of dead frets past the 12th fret on the Epiphones a lot of the time. And even the one that I own has a couple dead frets past the 17th, but this one, I picked it up off the shelf and I'm on the 15th fret B string and I'm doing a bend, and the fret's kind of killing it out a little bit there. You can hear it dying out just slightly. Overall, the Epiphone Les Paul Custom and the Standard and the Classic, I mean, they're all great guitars for the price, and they're pretty well made. The thing that I like to do with mine is every spring, every summer, every fall, every winter, like every season change, I just make sure to do like a setup on them, and for the most part, they work great for me. Shopping for the ultimate Gibson Les Paul. I'm going to show you what to look for, and hopefully we can find one that we want to take home. so let's get into it.
Just nice low gain setting and volume pretty low so we can hear the tone of the guitar.
First one I got in my hands here right now is the Gibson Les Paul Studio. This is the lowest of the models, and this is where we start with the Gibson. Okay, for all the fretboard testing, I've got the guitar amp on a clean channel so I can hear exactly what the frets are doing, and I'm just gonna run through all the frets on the guitar and make sure they are good to go. That is the number one thing that I look for when buying a new guitar, is just making sure there's no dead frets anywhere. So this Gibson Les Paul Studio sounds like it's good to go. Everything sounds good on it. Just do a couple string bends higher up in the frets to double check it as well. Okay, so you can hear right there, this one's got a bit of a, because of the string set up on it right now, the bridge setup, the action's pretty high on it. So right now it's very uncomfortable to do a string bend up in the higher registers at the moment. Holding down that baby E string, I'm getting caught on the B string when I lift. So this one's gonna need some further setup before it's extremely playable. Next one up in the Gibson Les Paul food chain is the Classic, and then I got a nice cherry red one here. It looks pretty good. So we're gonna give it its paces and have a listen and make sure it sounds good. Okay, let's do the same tests on the Les Paul Classic now. We'll do the high up fret tests, make sure there's no dead frets or buzzing. While I'm here, I'll do some string bends too. So the action on this one is slightly lower than the Studio, so you get the bends in a little easier there. Still needs to be lower just slightly for it to be playable though, in my opinion. Alright, so that's it for fret testing on the Les Paul Classic. Going from the Studio, this one definitely feels a lot nicer straight from the factory. Everything feels pretty well set up on it. One cool feature about all the Gibson Les Pauls too is they got the push-pull pots for changing between all the pickups. I love this feature, so you can get a lot of different tone combinations with these. Alright, the last Gibson Les Paul I got in my hands for today is the Standard. This is the most expensive one that they got in store. Obviously, Les Paul Custom is as high as they go in that food chain, but I mean, realistically, who can afford one of those anyways? This one has quite a big neck on it too, so if you got small hands, it might be a little difficult to play, but other than that, this one is by far the best one that I've played today. It just feels great playing it. Okay, time to test the Les Paul Standard, give it all the fret testing. My final opinion is if you're gonna save up the money and treat yourself to a Gibson definitely save up and get the Gibson Les Paul standard. I mean, right away, as soon as I picked this thing up, I could tell the quality from the luthiers and everybody at the Gibson factory, all the work they put in to make these things. And the Iced Tea Pearl color too, can't go wrong with that. That's a nice one. It just feels good, you know? It feels heavy, well built, and I think it'd be a guitar if you bought it, you just would never let it go. You would just keep that guitar for your whole entire life and you'd be extremely happy with it. Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you had fun shopping for a Gibson Les Paul. I mean, they're just beautiful guitars. If you are into guitar and guitar-related accessories and want to see more stuff from me in the future, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. That would be greatly appreciated, supporting the channel. And we hope to see you in the future. Peace.